And we are live.
Thanks everyone for watching. This is the Community Affairs and Planning Committee meeting, and it's Monday, January 9th, 2023. And I'd like to say this meeting of the Community Affairs and Planning Committee is being held electronically and live streamed on the town's website. All members of council and attendants are participating by audio and video teleconference, and town staff are available throughout the meeting. If council members have any questions on the agenda, for members of the public watching from home, please bear with us. We encounter any technical difficulties throughout this meeting. Next, I would like to do the land acknowledgement as per our agenda. We'd like to begin this meeting by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is situated within the traditional and treaty territories of the Mississauga. More specifically, the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation, signatories of the Gunshot Treaty of 1788 and the Williams Treaty of 1923. This land is and will continue to be home to the Indigenous peoples. Let us acknowledge the mistakes and traumas of the past through authenticity and support truth and reconciliation. Let us engage and celebrate Indigenous communities by being leaders of action and acknowledging the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples and the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's recommendations towards truth and reconciliation. Let us keep these principles close as we continue towards truth and reconciliation, and as we move forward with kindness and respect as a community. So I have next any disclosure of pecuniary interest from any member of council. Seeing none, we move on to the adoptions of minutes, which is the regular meeting of December 5th, 2022. I have Regional Councillor Lee and Mayor Sean Collier as the seconder. Can I have a vote on that? All in favor, or any questions? All in favor. That passes. Thank you so much. Next, we have the public meeting, but there are any members of the public present? Jason, sorry, clerk?
No, there are not.
Okay, thank you so much. So we move on to item 5, which is presentations and reports. Item 5.1, which is the Ajax Housing Strategy Phase 2 Recommendation Report and Draft Housing Action Plan. I will turn it over to you, Director of Planning and Development Services, Mr. Romanowski.
Thank you, Chair. Joyce Chen will be providing the presentation this evening that's accompanied the staff report that's in tonight's agenda.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Hello, Ms. Chen. Nice to see you.
Good evening. I'll share my screen so you guys can see the presentation. Sorry. Sorry about that. I guess everyone can see my screen right now. Okay, so
yes, I believe we are good.
Okay, excellent. I will get started then. Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Joyce Chen. I'm a planner in Planning and Development Services. Tonight, I'm here to present the Ajax Housing Strategy Phase 2 Recommendation Report and Draft Housing Action Plan. The presentation tonight includes a brief recap of the Phase 1 report, an introduction to the Phase 2 Recommendation Report and Draft Housing Action Plan, which presents 3 housing goals and 30 housing actions. This will be followed by the timing and next steps for the final Town of Ajax Housing Action Plan. The Phase 1 report, background data, and housing needs analysis was presented to the June 6, 2022 Community Affairs and Planning Committee meeting and was released for public consultation. The report provided an overview of population, household, and housing-related statistics in the town and identified 11 housing gaps. During consultation, an online housing survey was made available on the Housing Strategy IMO page for 90 days. Staff hosted consultation sessions with the town's Accessibility Advisory Committee and Age-Friendly Ajax Steering Committee. Staff also met with local stakeholders, including Durham Region housing staff, nonprofits, and service providers, and held a public open house on June 22nd, 2022. Phase 1 was completed in September 2022, and staff began the Phase 2 process with the development of draft housing goals and actions, which will be presented this evening. Staff undertook Phase 2 early consultation in the fall with agency and nonprofit stakeholders, Durham Region housing staff, and town committees to help refine the draft housing goals and actions. In the Phase 1 report, 11 housing gaps were identified and generally fell into 4 categories: non-market housing, affordable housing, market housing, and emerging gaps and opportunities. The housing gaps identified the need for more shelter beds, supportive housing, including options for an aging population, transitional housing, and community housing, and a need for more ownership and rental housing that is affordable for low and moderate income households. There was also a need for more intensified housing opportunities, a need to diversify the housing stock as the majority of housing in the town is in the form of detached dwellings, a need for a better mix of housing types and tenures, a need for more purpose-built rentals, a need for more housing options for smaller households, and an opportunity to work with the Region of Durham on short-term rental monitoring, and an opportunity to advocate for funding programs from the provincial and federal governments. These 11 gaps have helped to guide the development of the housing goals and actions in the Housing Recommendation Report and Draft Housing Action Plan. The Phase 2 report presents a summary of consultation from Phase 1 and the early consultation with key stakeholders and town committees on Phase 2. It proposes 3 housing goals and a draft housing action plan with 30 actions. The draft housing actions are divided into 4 categories: policy directions and municipal tools, with actions related to the town's comprehensive official plan review and comprehensive zoning bylaw review; financial tools, partnerships, with actions where the town can work with other groups and agencies with a role or stake in housing; education and awareness, with actions intended to provide information, resources, and learning opportunities. Before I go on, I will note that this recommendation report and draft housing action plan was substantially completed prior to Bill 23 More Homes Built Faster Act receiving royal assent and coming into effect. Actions that may be impacted by Bill 23 and forthcoming regulations have been identified with an asterisk. Staff will work to update the final action plan to reflect any impacts from Bill 23. The housing goals were developed based on the Phase 1 housing gaps, along with feedback received from the housing survey and input provided in Phase 2 early stakeholder and community consultation. The goals have been crafted to cover the entire housing continuum, as illustrated on this slide, with Goal 1, prioritize safe, affordable, and temporary housing options. Goal 1 focuses on the left side of the continuum with non-market and temporary housing, which includes emergency shelters, transitional housing, and some supportive housing, as well as affordable housing. Goal 2, preserve, improve, and expand the supply of rental units. Goal 2 focuses on rental housing, including preserving and increasing the supply of both affordable and market rental units, while also striving to improve the condition of the units. Goal 3, facilitate a balanced mix of housing types and tenures. Goal 3 focuses on the right side of the continuum with both affordable and market ownership housing and aims to balance the supply by providing more types of housing and tenures. I'm going to go briefly over the actions. However, the Phase 2 Draft Housing Action Implementation Plan included with the report goes into more detail and identifies the gaps and goals that the action addresses, the lead and supporting town departments responsible for implementing the action. Planning staff have worked with other town departments identified as a lead or support for implementation, and they are aware of what their responsibilities would be. Approximate implementation timing of the action within a short term, less than 5 years from 2024 to 2028, medium term, 5 to 10 years from 2029 to 2023, and long term, 10+ years from 2034 onwards. And if any additional resources are required, this could include assistance from the Age-Friendly Ajax Steering Committee, consultant resources, grant opportunity, and/or in-kind services. As it is anticipated that the final Town of Ajax Housing Action Plan will be adopted mid this year, implementation of the plan is identified to start in 2024. There are 16 actions proposed under policy directions and municipal tools. Under policy directions, these actions include updates through the town's next official plan review, including adding new definitions such as affordable housing and housing options to be consistent with provincial policy, introducing policies to strengthen the protection of rental housing from conversion, and requiring the submission of an affordability and accessibility analysis for new development. This will allow discussion of affordability and accessibility within new development upfront and allow the town to track which applications are proposing accessible and/or affordable units. Additionally, other proposed policy directions actions include collaborating with the region to complete a housing assessment report to be able to implement inclusionary zoning in the town's GO Transit Station mixed-use area, which is a protected major transit station area. Consider increasing affordable housing targets in the official plan and implementing a development permit system in the town's intensification areas. And lastly, updating and developing terms of references related to rental housing conversion study and planning rationale report. Actions that can be undertaken through the town's comprehensive zoning bylaw review include expanding accessory housing unit permissions, expanding housing options, aligning permitted residential uses with policies in the town's official plan, and consider reducing parking standards for special needs and affordable housing. There are 2 actions proposed under municipal tools, which include monitoring and tracking the town's housing inventory by type and tenure, and initiating a 10-year review of the lodging houses bylaw and associated zoning provisions. For financial tools, as the town is a lower tier municipality, there is limited ability to provide financial incentives. There are 2 actions proposed within the town's purview, including utilizing the community improvement plans to consider providing financial incentives specific to affordable housing or exploring options to collect funds for affordable housing through the community benefits charge bylaw. Given Bill 23, these financial tools will need to be examined further and may not form part of the final housing action plan. Partnerships are ways in which the town can work with the province, upper tier municipalities, private sector, and nonprofits and housing service providers to encourage relationships in housing. There are 5 actions proposed under partnerships. Work with other public bodies to identify surplus land or underutilized properties suitable for affordable housing. Explore partnership opportunities to deliver affordable housing and/or alternative housing pilot projects. Establish an affordable and supportive housing development liaison to provide application guidance and facilitate partnership opportunities between nonprofit community housing providers and for-profit developers. Partner with Durham Region for the monitoring of short-term rentals. Encourage Durham Region as the housing service provider to manage affordable housing units that are created in Ajax. There are 7 actions proposed under education and awareness that are intended to provide information, resources, and learning opportunities. These actions include utilizing the expertise of the Age-Friendly Ajax Steering Committee to assist with the implementation of related housing strategy actions, sharing development application statistics, creating a dedicated housing webpage, connecting with post-secondary institutions to assist with research on topics such as alternative affordable housing options and innovative infill housing forums. As identified in the Phase 1 report, Ajax is reported to have the 2nd highest homelessness, or often referred to as unsheltered population, in Durham. There is opportunity to coordinate information sessions for town staff delivered by external agencies on homelessness and support services available to individuals experiencing or at risk of homelessness to educate staff and be better equipped to respond to public inquiries. Additional proposed actions include advocating for funding or grant programs from the upper levels of government for affordable housing projects, homelessness supports, and renovation and/or rehabilitation of existing rental units, and promoting the region's public awareness campaigns when launched through the town's website and associated networks. As identified earlier, early consultation with agency and nonprofit stakeholders, Durham Region Housing staff, and town committees on the Phase 2 draft housing goals and actions was completed in fall 2022. Based on the feedback provided during discussion, the draft housing goals and housing actions were refined to what was presented tonight. Staff are seeking authorization to release the Phase 2 recommendation report and draft housing action plan to the public for an opportunity to comment on the draft goals and action plan. A virtual public open house is tentatively set for February 8, 2023, and the Phase 2 report will be uploaded to the Housing Strategy IMO page. The final Town of Ajax Housing Action Plan is anticipated to be completed and brought to Council for adoption in June 2023. This concludes the presentation. Steph, Sean, and myself are here to help answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Chen, for that. I have on my speakers list so far Mayor Collier and Regional Councillor Crawford. If there's any other member of council, let me know. Mayor Collier, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to Ms. Chen, thank you for your presentation. And let me get my notes here. I mean, I want to start by saying I think I'm happy to see this come forward as Phase 2 and completely support the creation of a housing strategy. And this was absolutely one of the things I heard the most at the door, even more than taxes this time around. It is a real problem and a growing problem. What I don't understand is it appears we're adding through some pieces of this is some more red tape to the process. And we know because of time, nothing is getting less costly. The more we delay, the more costly it gets. So my questions are going to be primarily about the comprehensive official plan review process being proposed and the amendments through this. So I guess first is, and I'll just kind of go through the recommendations. So first, I absolutely agree with adding a definition for affordable housing, but what about adding definitions for other types of housing like mixed use? I don't believe that any townhouses built in Ajax would ever be considered affordable. I'm concerned that without strict definitions for a number of different things, that's what we might get.
Through the chair to Mayor Collier, the affordable housing definition is proposed through the official plan review as more of a, I guess, just a sort of compliance with provincial policy as they've defined it. It's just so that we have that definition available. In terms of additional definitions, the second definition for housing options to be consistent with what the province has already provided. There's the different housing types that are in there for the housing options, which could include the various different types of housing that are available.
And that's what I'm getting to. So if we put a definition for affordable housing, that's great. But there still is no teeth in what we're doing as far as in our official plan to define what type of housing there is. And I just don't think, you know, we can define what affordable is, but there's nothing sort of stopping any developer from coming and building whatever they want. Is there not a means that we can do to specify what's going into specific areas?
Perhaps I can,
or even perhaps the density requirements, Steph.
Yes, perhaps I can answer this question through you, Mr. Chair, to Mayor Collier. So yes, we can be more specific in the official plan, and the official plan does lay out based on the land use designation, whether it's low density, medium density, or one of the mixed use designations, the types of housing forms that would be permitted within that land use designation, and then that is then translated into the zoning bylaw. So there is an opportunity through the official plan review to look at the various types of permitted housing in the designations and have, expanded permissions or include new different types of housing forms so that they can be as of right. You are correct in terms of affordable housing. It's difficult to, outside of an area where inclusionary zoning as a tool is permitted, it's difficult for us to specifically permit or specifically require affordable housing. So under land use planning, we're looking at housing types. We can look at housing tenure, rental, or ownership, but when it comes to affordability, we need specific legislative tools like inclusionary zoning to require something like that through an official plan or a zoning bylaw.
But through zoning bylaws, can we not specify specific densities?
Yes, sorry to answer that question as well. So our official plan does speak to densities in the various land use designations. Our zoning bylaw does as well to a certain extent. Our zoning bylaw is currently being updated. It is out of date in terms of its conformity to the current official plan. So we are re-engaging that project and looking at wrapping that zoning bylaw review up over the next year or two. And then the zones will have densities associated with them, whether they be minimum densities or maximum densities.
Okay, I would suggest minimum, but I really want this to have some teeth. And in some areas that we do have potential for affordability, if we don't have those, in my opinion, those minimum densities set out, we're getting townhouses. And we all know that we need higher density than townhouses to be able to provide any type of affordability, I would think. So that would be my suggestion there. I hope that we put in some very strong wording and not just define affordability, but go further.
And through the chair to you, Mayor Collier, what we can do is look at the actions we currently have in our draft here and either refining the actions related to housing options or adding a new action in relation to what you're talking about in terms of different types and minimum densities, and be specific in these actions for directions in the official plan and review and zoning bylaw review.
And to be clear, I'm not talking about, everything 25 stories or above. What I'm talking about is mid-rise, for instance, 6, 8 story, that type of thing. Again, getting those volumes up to hopefully bring prices down into a more affordable range.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. My next is recommendations 3, 4, and 5. They all seem pretty much the same. A rental housing demolition policy and developing and that type of thing. So is what you're trying to say with this is the spirit of this, that if a property is ever designated as a rental property, it is always going to be a designated rental property. There will be provisions put in place through this OP review that will make that so it can never go back to a non-rental unit. Is that the intent?
Perhaps I can answer that question as well through the chair to you, Mayor Collier. The intent is to protect the number of units we have now. So for instance, if we have a development such as the one at the northeast corner of Harwood and Bailey, low-rise rentals, if they ever chose to redevelop, tools like this could say you're demolishing 100 rental units and you're redeveloping, so you will have 300 units. You have to ensure that 100 of those stay rental. The other 200 could become condominium if you like. So it's to protect what we have.
I guess, and I can understand the reasoning behind that. I guess what I'm wondering is, and you're talking about the Sherwood Gardens there, I believe, but a lot of the things we're coming online now are rental units. And if we get to the point where we have an abundance of rental units and markets change, which they often do, I just don't want to tie our hands going forward. I think there should be some sort of caveat in there that allows some sort of flexibility, that at least it's not written, this can never happen. It has to fulfill certain requirements for potential exceptions or whatever.
Yes, and there is a trigger associated with this. As long as the vacancy rate is above the healthy 3%, it would
Okay.
not trigger this. If the vacancy rate is below and consistently below, then it would trigger this tool.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Now to recommendation 6, the affordability and accessibility analysis. We just approved through OPA 71 a number of additional studies that could be required to make an application complete. And that was in, I guess, because of changes made in Bill 23 and Bill 109 as far as timelines. But here you're asking to add 2 or 3 additional studies or requirements. And I see this, my personal opinion, as just, another layer of red tape. And I want to expedite, not slow things down. So I just want to understand so requiring an additional study, I don't understand this one. We know we need this type of units. We know we have an issue. I'm not understanding why you would want every application to submit an affordability and accessibility analysis, because I think if one is done, it would probably apply to every application and wouldn't need to be duplicated. Can you explain this to me?
So maybe I can take that one. So through the chair to Mayor Collier. So what this item is intended to, and what happens, we see these get grouped in with planning rationale reports a lot of times. So it just becomes a component of an existing study. And it's really just to help us track the number of units that are coming online and what types of initiatives developments are implementing that may improve accessibility of a development. So it's not an item that's intended to make anything difficult. It's just an item to help identify and help us track what affordability units they're providing, what accessibility items that they're providing, and then also to have that conversation with them as early in the process as possible to help work together to identify initiatives that can help move their development and improve housing affordability and accessibility, and just try to get some of those initiatives into the development. Similar to what we would do with like green standards, it's just a reporting mechanism.
Okay, so this isn't an additional study. This is an additional consultant and, an extra, 50 grand in fees and an extra few months in delay.
That's correct.
This is something a developer can do themselves, just outlining the criteria you set out.
Yeah, that's right. Or certainly their planner.
Okay, because I asked that because recommendation 8 suggests increase in requirements for affordable units. And I'm thinking if we're going to put in, and this kind of is to my first question to Stev, if we're going to be setting these limits and laying things out in our zoning bylaws, as long as these thresholds are met, I'm just not understanding why an extra study or an extra document would be required if those are met. Okay, you're nodding. All right, good. We're thinking the same thing. Recommendation 10, a requirement for a planning rationale report. And I'll quote the report: to address how the proposed development is helping to achieve affordable housing targets by diversifying housing stock in Ajax. I would think this would be obvious, and I'd suggest unnecessary.
It's always necessary. It's dealing with the land use through the chair to Mayor Collier. It's the foundation by which there's the consideration of the planning merits of an application of this magnitude. Without a planning rationale report, how are we to consider the merits of the development proposal?
So
I mean, at a minimum, Mr. McCullough just said that in your previous about the additional studies, a planning rationale report will have those various components in them. So it achieves a lot on its own as part of, the consideration of a complete application. So it's not, it's absolutely necessary.
So we don't require anything like that now? Mr.
We
Romanescu?
require it for pretty much every application of planning rationale reports required. We need to understand what the proposal is. What are they proposing? The various elements of it. If the affordability pieces, if it's that type of project, pretty much every application requires some type of planning rationale
And
submitted with it.
Perhaps I
Go
can
ahead, Steph.
clarify as well. So what this action is saying is to update the terms of reference for a planning rationale report to be explicit that that is information that we require in a planning rationale report. Right now, we are working on developing terms of references for our various studies and reports to help guide applicants on what we are looking for in those reports. And right now, the information in our official plan on what's required in a planning rationale report is not fulsome. So this is an action just being very specific about one of the line items we would be including in the terms of reference.
Okay, because in me reading this, it appears that this is a new report, but you're saying this is not a new report. This is an existing report, but just you are clarifying a little bit. Okay. Let's talk about parking for a second, because recommendation number 14 with regard to parking, it talks about only consideration in intensification areas. And I can think of a number of reasons why you would want to consider parking in many areas. And we just did on 310 Kingston Road, for instance. We identified that that building was going to have a certain number of accessible and affordable units and made concessions with regards to parking. I don't know if that's in an intensification area or not, but I guess my question is, why would we only limit this to intensification areas and not just have this as something that we can look at irregardless, as long as the development application checked certain boxes?
And perhaps, oh, okay, go ahead.
So through the chair to Mayor Collier, so we would be looking at sort of potentially reducing parking requirements in intensification areas. This would be, I guess, a tool potentially to assist with developers that are proposing affordable units or special needs housing, as the cost of parking is quite high. So looking at intensification areas, they're close to rapid bus transit routes. So the residents that are relocating there would have other means to get around.
I understand the reasoning, Ms. Chen. I'm just saying, rather than put like only in intensification areas in our OP, why would we not just leave it open so we can look at parking on a case-by-case basis? And if it makes sense, we look at it. If it's on major bus routes and whatever else, we look at it. I just don't want to see us limiting our options, that's all.
And I can add to that. So through the chair to Mayor Collier, our intensification areas also include the corridors. So along Kingston, everything along Kingston Road, Salem, Westney, Bailey, all our corridors are included in our intensification areas. In terms of outside of our intensification areas, we can look at it on a site-by-site basis. An applicant can submit a parking utilization study to look at reduced rates in multi-unit mixed-use or residential developments. When we're looking at our lower density areas, the province's new provisions with regard to accessory dwelling units and maximum parking rates. We feel that those parking rates set by the province are a good benchmark for our low density areas in terms of maximum one parking space per unit when you have more than one unit on a lot. But I think outside of our intensification areas, we would like to look at it on a site-by-site basis. And we have in the past allowed reduced parking rates on various—
With community benefit.
The reduced parking rates were rationalized through parking utilization studies. They would have been either captured through a zoning bylaw amendment or perhaps a minor variance. But we haven't done anything where an associated community benefit or payment would have been given by the applicant.
Okay. Are you looking at potentially just prescribing rates. And I ask this because we did, I think, on 310 Kingston Road, for example, because they provided a certain number of accessibility and affordable units, allowed a reduction to, I think, 0.75 per unit of parking. Would you look at saying, in our MTSA, for instance, where we know we're going to have high density, when we know we are right there at the transit station and direct access, and I would expect a lot of people to buy there because they don't own a car and they have easy access to transit, just fixing a number like 0.65, for instance, and just saying, as long as you meet that, rather than going through a whole big thing. Would you be looking at prescribing rates?
So through the chair to Mayor Collier, yes, through our zoning bylaw review exercise, we are looking at reducing rates in our intensification areas at the GO station as well. The zoning bylaw does have prescribed rates currently, and we are looking at lowering some of those rates for some areas.
Okay, very good. I see more and more people, and that's what we've been trying to do. And Marilyn, you know now, as far as transit chair, is to get people out of their cars. And I think the more and more we incent that, and if somebody buys one of these new units and they know that there's not parking, I mean, you wouldn't buy it if you had 3 cars. It doesn't make sense. So I think we should be addressing that. So I'm glad to hear that stuff. I have a concern with recommendation 17 to do with CIPs. We tried CIPs when we did Pat Bailey Square, and it worked. It worked well to get the development going. However, we know the serious issues we've had with, you know, basically we're just taking the cost and we're taking it on as a town, and we still have to pay it. It doesn't change the price. It just changes who pays it, and we, the taxpayer, pay it through our levy. So there's no mechanism that I'm aware of that requires the developer to pass on that savings and reduce rents. And I don't mean to be negative, but I would not call those rents at Pat Bailey Square affordable. And many people that are criticizing don't feel that those are affordable because they are quite high. So I have a real concern with having CIP as one of the recommendations, because really, to me, that's just transferring the cost from one to the other. And I don't want to be transferring the cost to the taxpayer to try and do this without a mechanism that forces those savings passed on to the developer, to the eventual tenant, sorry.
So I can take this one. So through the chair to Mayor Collier. So with Bill 23, this is one of the recommendations that we fully expect to be eliminated from the final action plan. Bill 23 introduced legislation
For reduced DCs.
That's right, for affordable housing. So we anticipate that this will be one of the ones that are no longer in the final housing action plan.
Okay, so you just segued into my next question, or my next comment, which is Bill 23 is already bringing DC reductions, which is also transferring the costs onto us and the taxpayer. Let's not be fooling around. It's the same amount is still getting paid. It's just transferring. And again, there is still no mechanism to force the developer to pass on those savings to the eventual purchaser or tenant. Question mark.
Yeah. So through the chair, the only item that the province has come out in the interim is related to inclusionary zoning units.
Okay.
And there would be a requirement that the units be offered at 80% of the average market rate, and there would be an agreement that's established. We don't have too many details yet in terms of what that agreement would look like, or who, even the parties who it's between, who enforces them. We're still in the early process of understanding how a lot of this Bill 23 stuff will roll out. But that 80% of the market rate would be established by the province through bulletins that the ministry would release. And again, we don't know how often those bulletins would be released and how often they would update the average market rent or the average market sale price. But that was an item that was included in Bill 23.
Okay, and I think I've been quite clear. This is just a download to municipalities. This is not costing the province anything, but it's costing municipalities something. Has there been any further development from the province saying that they are going to be making municipalities whole? And this is slightly off topic, Chair, so I ask for a bit of leeway on that one.
As you were, sir.
So through the chair, Mayor Collier, no, unfortunately, we haven't heard any updates as to providing funding to municipalities for infrastructure,
Okay, so the taxpayer will still bear that burden for now.
as we understand it.
Okay, those are my questions, Chair. Thank you so much to staff. You've done a great job. And I just want to reiterate, I don't want to appear overly critical. I just don't want to see anything that's going to slow down, and no disrespect to planners, but what I feel is an already slow process. And that's not you, that's the Planning Act, but I just want to see things move quicker. And that was why I was asking those. I want to make sure that we're not putting up any more roadblocks to moving this forward. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mayor Collier. So on the speakers list, just so we know, I have Regional Councillor Crawford, Councillor Bauer, and Councillor Henry. If anyone else has it, just let me know. Next up, the Regional Councillor Marilyn Crawford. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is around, do we ever see the possibility of some of these apartments or units that are being built having a component of rent to own or lease to own? Because from what I understand, it doesn't exist out there. It allows someone who may not have a credit rating that is high enough that they can get a loan. It requires less down payment, and the rent that they are paying towards their unit would be one that would go towards like a down payment or a mortgage payment towards owning their home. Like I know that the words affordable housing are being thrown out there, but I mean, honestly, 10 to 20% less than market rate is still not really affordable when you still have to come down, with a fairly substantial down payment to own a home, or even renting. There's no cap on that rent. So there's no guarantee that rent stays the same. So anyway, I don't know, has anyone ever done any research into that idea?
Perhaps I can take this question through the chair to Regional Councillor Crawford. It is not something that we've done a lot of research on. It is a housing model that we are aware of. However, in land use planning, that's not something we can define or control or require. Again, we would look at the type of housing form, whether it's a townhouse or an apartment or a single detached, and tenure, rental, ownership. We can't require tenure either. If someone wants to have a development that's rental, then that's at their purview. Something like this would be a model that the developer would have to embrace and do on their own. It's not something that would be prohibited in any of our zoning or official plan policies. It's just not something that we can deal with through land use planning.
Okay, thank you. That's all.
Through the chair to Mayor, to Councillor Crawford, if I may, Councillor Tyler Morin, and even to Mayor Collier's point, and maybe some of the future ones, a lot of the affordability stuff really does rely on a lot of the partnership components that could come out of this as developers come forward and work with other types of organizations that offer that, which could include those types of housing models, the rent to own or lease to own, or other types of affordable components. That's where really I guess the incentives could be drawn from by a developer in a partnership situation with a community group or a non-for-profit type of group that specializes in that. And you see a lot of those in bigger cities like Toronto, Ottawa, Hamilton, the bigger centers where they have those different types of resources. And I think we'll get there in Durham Region. It's just a matter of ensuring we got the right strategy in place that draws that attention.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you for that insight, Director Romanowski, and thank you, Councillor Crawford. Next up, we have Councillor Bauer. Sorry, I didn't mean to get you in mid-drink there.
Thanks very much, Chair. Good evening. Thank you very much for the presentation and for the information in the report. It's fascinating to me. I just had a couple questions. On on page 25 of the whole report, it talks about the Town of Ajax official plan. And it says, the town's official plan has housing objectives too. And one of the items says, strive to achieve a minimum affordable housing target of 25% for low and moderate income households. So maybe can you just explain to me what that means, and are we achieving that?
I can answer that question through the chair to Councillor Bauer. So that is a goal within our official plan. In terms of achieving it, based on our phase 1 report, it would appear that we are not achieving it. It is an aspirational target. It's a target that pretty much every municipality has. There aren't, we didn't have the tools previous to require it. Inclusionary zoning is a tool that's going to help us achieve that. So it is an aspirational target, and no, we are not achieving it in Ajax.
Thank you. Would you be able, and I'm sorry I didn't ask these questions earlier to give you more information. Would you be able to tell me where you think we are?
I can definitely have a look back in the phase 1 report and provide that information to you at a later date, if that's all right.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you very much for that, Steph.
Thank you.
And the other question I had was about the lodging houses bylaw review. I think that's number 16, the item. And I noticed in the implementation plan that it's marked as a medium-term goal. So, or timeline. So if it's a 10-year, I think it's really important that we do that. And I have heard from residents about it. In particular, there's a couple of residents who talk about that. And I did tour a lodging house over the last few months to see what it looked like and what it would entail. And I think it's a viable, like a good option if we do it right. So if our bylaw is currently almost 10 years old, medium term means we're not even going to consider reviewing it for another 6 years minimum. So is there a way? I think we should look at it sooner if possible.
Through the chair to Councillor Bauer. In terms of timing, we looked at our staff resources. We are obligated to complete our comprehensive zoning bylaw review in the next year or so that we can then start our next official plan review. Both those reviews are mandated and legislated under the Planning Act, so they have timelines associated with them. And given our current resources in the policy section, we feel it is that we would be able to get to it in the midterm quite comfortably. We may be able to get to it in the short term, but it would be closer to the end of the short term, beginning of medium term in terms of timing.
Okay. So is it possible that could change and you could bring that forward if it's an issue of resource?
Through the chair to Councillor Bauer, it is possible. It is something that we could bring consulting services on board to start that project or to undertake that project. And then that way it can be done concurrently with staff undertaking the OP and the zoning bylaw review. That is a possibility, but it would have to be an approved budget item.
Okay. Okay. So got to think about that. Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Great information. I really appreciate all the work that goes into this. I'm looking forward to all the upcoming next steps. That's it for me right now, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bauer. Next, we have Councillor Henry.
Okay, so through the chair to staff, I want to ask a question with regards to this review, and I want to ask a hypothetical question that I'm not seeing in here, and how we're looking at this review at strategic planning and MZOs. So this is hypothetical. Does an MZO help achieve this goal or not?
I can answer that question, although through the chair to Councillor Henry, if I can ask for some clarification with regard to your question. Are you asking about the actions in the draft action plan in relation to an MZO?
Sorry, my internet went a little fuzzy. Could you repeat that again?
Yes. So if you could clarify for me your question, are you asking your question specifically about the actions in our draft action plan in relation to an MZO, or are you asking about specifically about the official plan review or the zoning bylaw review?
What I'm asking is, hypothetically, let's say we were to take a property, any property, and ask for an MZO on that property. Do we have the ability to control the affordable housing of that property through the MZO?
Oh, sorry, sorry, through the chair, if I could just get some. You're asking if we can have a mechanism through an MZO that'll dictate how much a development would be affordable?
Yes, that's one of the questions.
Okay, what's the other question? Because I think we need to understand all the questions
The other
that you
question-
have in relation to this so we could answer it properly. If you don't mind,
Well,
Councillor Henry.
I'd like to start with that one first.
Does staff need, would staff have to come back and
It's
answer
a
this?
hypothetical question, so I'm not too sure. Like, could we put a metric in a zoning bylaw that talks to affordability? Stev, I guess that's the question. Like 20% or 10% or 15%?
So on a
Yes.
as a hypothetical answer, if a property owner had wanted an MZO and council's support for an MZO on the property, and part of their request of what they wanted to do is in their development was to provide a certain number of affordable units, I believe that that could be part of an MZO, hypothetically.
So the inclusionary zoning would not apply then in that, because right now the inclusionary zoning is kind of limiting to certain areas, correct? Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, you are correct. So inclusionary zoning as a tool is only currently permitted in protected major transit station areas, such as the mixed use area around our GO station.
So if I wanted to achieve affordable geared to rent income in a new build, I could not use the inclusionary zoning tool outside of that zoning area to achieve what I want, correct?
That is correct. You could not use that tool. And also, as a point of clarification, there is a nuanced difference between rent geared to income, which is generally referred to as social housing. These are units that are provided by a housing provider, which in Durham Region is Durham Region Housing. And affordable housing can be provided by the nonprofit sector or the for-profit sector, but those units are not the deep affordable units that rent geared to income units are.
That is my understanding, correct. So for clarification purposes, affordable housing is 10% less than that of market rent. Is that correct? Is that the definition?
For ownership housing, it is either 30% of the household's income or 10% below the market sale price for ownership. For rental, it is rent prices that are at or below the average market rent.
So when we, like, let's use Pat Billy Square as an example. We have affordable housing there. So that is 10% less than the market value, correct?
That is not ownership, that is rental. So it would be at their affordable units. And I'm not certain how they're managing or operating their affordable units, but rental would be, the rents would be at or below average market rents, which in Durham Region and Ajax are still quite high.
Yes, it is. It's not my idea of affordable rent by any means. So that's why I'm asking these questions. I had asked staff, the planning department previously last month about this inclusionary tool. I've got information on it. And now I'm coming back to you and asking, with looking at this, is there another tool in our toolbox? Does it work for or against meeting the goals of affordable housing within the town of Ajax? So we could use an MZO to our advantage, is what I'm hearing, when we go outside the boundaries of the inclusionary zoning. We could use that tool to get what we need for residents to achieve the affordable housing, correct?
So through the chair to Councillor Henry, I think that's something that we can investigate further and get back to you on. I can think of one
Okay.
example where I believe that they may have included that, but I'd have to see the wording in the MZO or if there was another mechanism to secure that. But that's something that we
Okay,
can.
and I just want to be clear, like, I'm not a fan of MZOs per se, but when the goal here, the very strong goal is affordable housing. I think we can all agree on that. So I'm looking for other tools in the toolbox to achieve that. And I want to know if that's an option when we're looking at this. So if someone can get back to me at a later date this week, I'd be very grateful. Someone from staff, please.
Are we good with that, staff? Just like to move on. Okay, that's good. Councillor Henry, you still have the floor if you have another question that's to do with this report.
I do. Thank you, Chair. My internet cut out for a minute, and I do apologize previously. Going back to accessible, there was something with accessible parking. Was it accessible parking in this presentation? Or accessible units?
Would have been accessible units.
And that was limiting parking, is that correct?
If it's through, through the chair to Councillor Henry, if it's the action on parking, reducing parking for the provision of special needs housing, or which include sort of the accessible units or affordable units, that could be a consideration. Is that the one that you're referring to, that action?
Okay, I believe that's around the time that my internet cut out for a short period of time. So that's what the mayor just spoke to briefly. And my question to that would be, with accessible units and minimizing parking in any way, I'm still not understanding why would we be minimizing parking? Because we have parking issues in North Ajax that I have a lot of complaints about. So I'm trying to, when looking at building new, I want to know why we'd be minimizing parking in any way. Can you please address that? Yes, Mayor Collier, are you?
Chair, would you like me to answer that?
Absolutely.
I just wanted to clarify my question. My question was to do specifically with the high density affordable units, not existing subdivisions, applications of subdivisions, those types of things. So we're talking strictly about this report and creating more affordable housing. And when I talked about reduced parking, it's recognizing that people that are living close to the GO station and some people that are living in either seniors or more affordable units may not necessarily have cars. So the need for parking might be less. And are we looking at that? That was the, I guess, spirit of my question.
Okay, so, and no disrespect to you, Mayor, but I know a lot of people in affordable housing that do have 1 or 2 vehicles. So again, my concern comes back to staff when we're talking about reducing parking, when we have residents complaining they don't have enough parking, regardless of the development. I do have a concern with that, and I just like to note it.
Okay. Do you have any other questions?
No,
Councillor
thank you,
Henry?
Chair.
Okay, thank you so much. Are there any other member of council that has questions for staff on this report? Regional Councillor Dyes, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I want to go back to the discussion we were having on partnerships, and that was on page 34. And I think partnerships are critical when we do anything like this. And one of the, you listed all the different types of partnerships Ajax could have with not-for-profit housing, I think was one that we missed. And I just wanted to make sure that that is one of our partners in housing that we should incorporate as we move forward in this plan. Not only do they provide, housing for people with rent geared to income as well, but their market rents are below market rents. They might also be able to help us with respect to property size. Some of them are older and have more property and may be able to accommodate an expansion onto their building. So I think having them around the table might be beneficial and sort of open our eyes to a lot of other things too, because we're just going through this process and we're going to go out for public comments. So I know we're going to get a lot of feedback as well. The other one I wanted to talk about was the number 60 was the draft housing plan. And again, Councillor Bauer did speak to this, and that was about the lodging houses. And I was really happy to see that you're going to review this. But I agree with Councillor Bauer that I'd like to see it done sooner if possible. We already have some of this housing here in Ajax, and it really supports people who are basically the working poor. So they're single, they live on their own, they can't afford to rent anything, so they live in a lodging house, and it works very well for them. And I know we've had issues in the past and we can move forward on that, but I think it's critical now while we have them that we keep them, because this is one step from keeping them out of homelessness. So it's very important that we have this option. So I'm wondering, if possible, if you would please, try and consider that for the short term. I think it's really important. So more of a comment than a question. The report was amazing, and thank you very much for all the work that went into it. It was really an in-depth look at things, and I'm looking forward to hearing the public comments on this second phase. So thank you.
Thank you, Regional Councillor Dyes. Any other member of council have questions? I think we've gone through. Okay, there being none, thank you so much again to staff for all your work in this very complex matter, and for your presentation, Ms. Chen, and all your insight to Mr. Romanowski and all your team. Thank you. So moving on, if you can put the agenda back up, which I'm sure you're working on right now, Mr. McWilliam. Can you hear me? You just need a moment. Sir, there we are. And I'm assuming you're putting the agenda back up. Yes.
Resolution.
Yes, we're moving on to resolutions, I guess is the next item. I can't see it. Can everyone else see it? No, I'm seeing the same thing you're
No,
seeing,
but
right?
you
Okay,
have the resolutions in front of you, correct?
I do. Okay, so moving on
Yeah,
to
just
resolutions, presentations and reports moved by Regional Councillor Dyes and seconded by Councillor Bauer. All in favor? That carries. Thank you so much. And is there another item? Can you hear me, Mr. McWilliam?
Mr. Chair, I think the deputy clerk's just having some technical issues.
No problem. Are we at the adjournment on the
Adjournment.
agenda? That's
Yes,
it?
I do believe we are, yes.
Okay, no problem at all. So for the adjournment, moved by the Regional Councillor Crawford, seconded by Councillor Henry. All in favor? Thank you so much. I see all hands, and thank you so much to staff and my council colleagues. Momentous occasion.
Good job, Rob.
Thank you, sir.
Well done,
History
Chair.
making.
Good job.
Have a good night, everyone.
Good night,
Have
everyone.
a good night.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.